Next up, we have Paul Maltby, the Chief Digital Officer at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Paul, take the stage.
Thank you very much. Here's the click. Right, so thanks everyone. So as Chief Digital Officer, I get to look after the digital systems and give my colleagues laptops that work finally. But also, my job is being Chief Digital Officer in a big policy department is helping that department deliver in an internet age. And some of what I'm talking about is how you broaden the skill set for digital capability into a policy world. And on here, right, sorry, back on. That's 4 seconds, you noted that, right? What I want to talk today about is the work we've been doing on housing, planning and land data in support of, I guess, the government's sort of main domestic policy priority of housing, getting more homes to be built. And in this, we're interested in data for lots of reasons, to make good policy, to think about how we effectively prioritise and build infrastructure. But we're really interested in the external users of this data in what we've sort of roughly been calling a sort of prop tech emerging sector. So people that are building digital services to try and shake up, I suppose, an industry that hasn't always been at the forefront of a sort of digital revolution. Now, in doing this, there's lots of sort of positives. So the good news is there's lots of data. We don't have to go and create data. There's data sort of gathering dust on civil servants' machines and local authority officials' machines. So, there's lots of potential data available. How hard can it be? The other side, from the prop tech side, is it seems to be there's plenty of opportunity to disrupt markets and for people to make money. So in a way, there's a sort of demand that you would expect to flow through this, which is sometimes an important element of making these systems work. Not that that's the only reason we're interested. But it won't surprise you. There's some issues around the data. So talking particularly to the external users, though in many ways reaffirming stuff that we knew internally, we knew that the data around housing, land and plannings, it's really hard to find. When you find it, it's hard to use it and hard to trust it. We found particularly the systems geared up for people being interested in data on a sort of one-to-one, human-to-human level. So as soon as you try to ask for data in bulk, there's lots of quite confusing processes, even for civil servants to get through, never mind for people less familiar with the system, particularly from local authorities, actually. We also know there's an issue with licenses for sort of fundamental mapping and for some of the identifiers, stuff that our colleagues and we are trying to work through in government, but this is particularly affecting for people looking at planning data or housing data, which is obviously geospatial in nature, and that is an issue, and it's a real blocker for some of this work to come forwards. And whilst there are always issues with data quality, sometimes it's not quite as you expect. So this is even in an area like the Brownfields Register, where my department has spent time and effort trying to create a good data standard. Some of the brownfields are pretty blue. And that's not for that particular authority, I should say. That's just it's a generic for that system. So what have we been doing? So we set up a digital land services team. So my colleague Paul Downey in the corner here leads that. And what we've been thinking about is trying to help policy colleagues who often think about sort of services, like we're interested in a service for helping you buy and sell homes or something like that. But actually those services themselves are reliant on the fundamental blocks of data, and people usually pay less attention to that. So quite a lot of our work is really focused on this sort of more fundamental layer of getting the core data in a fit state so that it can be exposed to third-party users, for journalists and campaigners and for prop tech people, but also it can feed services internally. We started off looking at things like the Brownfield sites register, and we thought that actually, perhaps optimistically, that things would be pretty all right. We might need to do some tweaking. We built a sort of data validator. So the aim was to try and help local authorities go, well, actually, maybe there's a few errors in the data. This will help show you how compliant with the standard you are, where you can fix it. In practice, we found the data was pretty poor. Fewer than 20% were compliant with the standard, and we realized that there was a more fundamental problem here with the standard itself. It was quite complex. People weren't really applying it, didn't fill it into the local authority's core work. For a second project we worked on with our colleagues who do developer contribution, which is like Section 106 money, if you're more familiar with that sort of terminology. Again, they had a standard as policy colleagues that they were ready to implement, and we helped sort of learning from the brownfield work, said, actually, let us help you go through a digital design process to understand how best to factor that, to slim it down, and to do it in a more sort of appropriate way. So the consultation just finished on this. We had the consultation, there was a sort of section which was through GitHub where people could comment on the standard itself, and you can still go along and have a look at that, even though formally that consultation is closed and we're awaiting the outcomes from that. But that was really nice to work in that sort of way with colleagues at that more fundamental data layer. And something that we're working on at the moment is local plans. So this is, each council does a thing every 5 years or so that says these are the rules for which you apply for planning in this area, and this is how many houses we're going to build and those sorts of things. And again, we sort of hope to be able to draw out data from these largely sort of PDFs that are just sort of locked away with lots of excellent work gone into them. We thought we'd be able to sort of expose that. Again, that's really, really hard, and so even things like the definitions that people were talking about for homes has obviously varied quite a lot. So we're hoping to do something in the shorter term that does start to expose what data we can find and help local authorities help us correct that and iterate that. But in the longer term, again, we're going to have to go back to how do we actually bite off a chunk of local plans, which are sort of enormous sort of entities in their own right, to try and improve the core data quality. Another thing that my team does is look at how do we improve local councils' digital capability and services. It's program Local Digital. We have a local digital fund. There's lots of I'm really excited by this work to collaborate with councils and trying to have repeatable patterns and plans for services. And there's again a big appetite amongst councils to try and get out of their legacy technology, which makes access to the data harder again than it might otherwise be. So there's a data element of this as well as a core, user focused and council worker focused improvement to their services. And we've been working with My Society actually more recently to look at how do we get something like akin to a register of planning data from the recent past, where there's huge interest from all different reasons to get access to this. We're looking at more simple things. Can we scrape it? Can we kind of be able to purchase it in other ways? But actually, look, there's this fundamental question about the data quality. So we're at the early stages of discovery on this, but I think is a really interesting area of work and something we're hoping to take forward. Within the team, we certainly have the digital services work that Paul leads. We have, as I've mentioned, the work on local authority digital capability, which is such a critical part of this. But we also do, if you like, more classic policy work. So I mentioned the work around ordnance survey and geospatial data. So again, there's sort of quite traditional policy work that goes on with colleagues across government to try and make better decisions around that. And we're also engaging with that sort of wider end users in the PropTech sector to see what their needs are, both from a data point of view, but also from a wider government support in something that's actually quite a weirdly fragile market. You would expect it to be perhaps stronger than it is at this point in time. And then my last few seconds, I just wanted to essentially big up the point around if people have come across the One Team Gov movement in and around government, not just in the UK now, but internationally. It's so important, I think, this thing of we are not a transactional service department in CLG. When you do digital in CLG, you don't ever go to CLG to get, MHCLG, to get a thing. You don't go as a user, if you like, to go to the CLG and get MHCLG and get a thing. We do policy work around system stewardship. And so trying to improve data, it fundamentally requires a working across the data, the digital and the policy communities. We can't fix this data plumbing without our policy colleagues. So for me, bringing those worlds together has been such an important part of what I think we've been doing to date and what I hope to see so much more of within my department and across Whitehall and local government in the near future. And that's me. Don't know how close I was. Thank you. I should say, we do try and work in the open wherever we can in this work, so please do pop in and have a look at the work we've got ongoing, much as say quite early stage, but come and say hi digitally or in person if you'd like.
Excellent, thank you, Paul. Questions?
Sam Smith, old foe of Paul's. With the spending round coming up, what's your biggest potential improvement using that available process?
Hi, Sam. Well, spending review, I suppose we may or may not be coming on, depending on what happens, I suppose. But we are quite hopeful that there's some, I think there's some quite significant possibilities on the local government side, both to improve the services that individuals get when you go and interact with local government in terms of service design and digital service quality, but actually in terms of breaking them away from that sort of legacy model that too many councils are sort of still tied up with, into a sort of more modern digital and technology approach. I think the opportunity there is quite a big improvement in cost saving and productivity. Just looking at things like in planning, with some of the councils that we were working with, there's sort of 50% failure demand rate for people putting in planning applications. And then you've got highly paid planners then interacting with individuals to say you haven't submitted the right documents in the right order. And you're just like, this is taking up the call centre, it's taking up planning, and this shouldn't be a hard problem to fix. But in the current design and technology setup, it really is. So I hope that on the back of the work that we've been doing with, we've got 16 projects live in the local digital space, and I hope on the back of that we'll be able to see more work in that space. I think that for me is quite exciting. I think if you think of the size of the digital possibility in central government, it's I think at least equivalent in local government.
So if we take the lady in the front row there, then the gentleman by the camera,
yeah,
and then the front row.
I didn't do your thing in order.
That's
Sorry,
right.
did I?
It's okay. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Louise Hutchinson from the Traffic Penalty Tribunal. We provide adjudication for people who receive parking and other traffic penalties. And it was interesting your point about local authorities. We actually managed to roll out a digital system to over 300 local authorities in a 12-month period. And I just wonder whether you're actually looking maybe outside of planning as well to look for other examples of what can be done easily in a web-based system.
Yes.
John McTernan from PSB Research. You've got competing audiences with very different values, so voters and citizens and residents and councillors and planners and builders and developers and volume builders and SME, small family builders. How do you decide between those competing priorities?
Thanks. John Downing from Ofgem. You're talking about using lots of different tools and techniques and common patterns. I wonder if there's specific tools that you promote specifically for using geospatial data in government.
Thank you. Right, this is actually really hard, isn't it? Trying to remember and think and newfound respect for politicians. And so on the other local digital services, so it's not, so we're obviously interested from MHCLG on the housing and planning side, but there's a huge range of services in local government. The LGA say up to 900 services. I suppose it depends how you count them a little bit. So our work on local digital spans across that range. And there's lots of, so there's 16 projects we funded. Again, if you go to localdigital.gov.uk, you can see the ones that we're working on. People are doing their sort of weekly show and tells in the open and blogging about that stuff, so you can see. I think it's the tip of an iceberg, though. I think, if you think about the main domains of local government, each of those need help and support. And we're hoping that over time, this is going to be a longer term plan, but that ability to be able to not just ship one product, but to do that product and then almost like productize the how you did it and the templates on design and technology and hopefully through into a sort of digital marketplace will reduce the burden and the cost for others to be able to replicate that service, adapting it to their own unique needs in local government. This isn't a one size fits all, but there's lots of common elements that I think we can make, which makes me so excited by it. Then John's question, so lots of competing interests. It is interesting, isn't it? So at the moment, it feels like on taking the digital land piece of work, there are a number of common elements. If you start right at the sort of bottom layer, if you like, thinking about core geospatial mapping and the identifiers that help link data together, well, actually they're common, whatever your purpose in life. Fundamentally, Ordnance Survey is there somewhere in the way if you're interested in sort of data about land. So that's an important thing to get right, and obviously people are working on that. I think you then sort of go up the layers, you think about like planning data. Again, whether you're interested in trying to expose for citizen, sort of enable citizens to be more vocal about what's happening with planning in their area, you're still interested in the sort of history of planning, even if you were compared to, say, somebody who's thinking about, well, I've just built some triangle-shaped houses for students near a railway station. Where else in the country could I build something like that outside of the area that I grew up in? you're still interested in those same sort of blocks of data. So you know that layer, the diagram is saying, you know, we're really interested in these fundamental blocks of data. They in turn feed services which feed decisions and information. I think in a way the choice has become more acute, higher up that level that you're interested in. Nonetheless, the question of what do we go and fix next has largely to date been dictated by what is our department working on, where there seems to be something useful, where someone's willing to work with us and we can get some stuff done. I think it's a good question for us to go as we interact particularly with external users, and they're starting to say things like they're interested in data about rental prices. So from the land registry, you get quite a lot about sales prices. There's very little data about rental prices, but there might be some things that we do like deposit rental schemes that might find a way into that. So we're trying to balance, well, okay, maybe we start new work in those areas that are not ones that are currently on the department's list. And I suspect the trade-offs will become more live to us as we get further on. And, oh, John, I can't remember your question. Remind me, please. Common tools about geospatial data. So, well, there are lots of geospatial tools. I probably shouldn't stray into that. I suppose on the common patterns, what we're trying to do is say, as people say whatever it is, say it's like residence parking service or something like that, as people start to design in local councils what that should look like, they're thinking about what their user research has found, what their workflow is, what the design on the page works like and how they've iterated that, what the stack looked like underneath that. As people are starting to do that, there will be common elements, and it won't be exactly the same council to council, but we think there's a lot of appetite and possibility in taking some of the pain, so you neither have to take the legacy product that you've been using for 20 years, nor grow your own internal digital team from scratch, GDS-like, because most councils won't be able to do that. There's a space in between where we can fill a gap to take some of the pain away, yet still create services that are modern and acceptable for everybody, but you can still amend and adapt to your particular local needs. So that's the sort of we're more thinking about it from the core services within local government, rather than the particular internet age tools that you might use to do particular tasks. So if I can chicken out of your question in that way, I'll do that.
30 seconds. Does anybody have one very, very quickly? We've got two there very, very quickly.
Martin Pilkington from RHE Global. We have 100 local authorities using our app, and we have 400 local authorities using our collaboration software. Is there a forum that companies like us and anyone else that is here could engage with you? Because we've got a lot of ideas about how we can use data and how we can do analytics.
Yes, absolutely. So we've been working with Tech UK, not just for members of Tech UK, but as a sort of convener, because we're, as you say, there's a big shift that's going on the supply side. In many ways, it's not brand new, is it? We've been making this shift for a long time, and people in local government have been working really hard to create this. It's not like just been invented here. We're kind of riding that wave. So yes, Tech UK have been providing a forum that feeds in directly to us and has helped convene all different types of suppliers in this market. So I would point you towards colleagues there.
We've hit the zero bet. If we have a very quick question, a very quick answer.
How can we share the learning around data infrastructure across departments?
Oh, there's a quick question. Well, I think, this is why I'm really glad that we've got this event, and I think there's other ways in which we've met up more sort of informally. Open Data Camp is a nice example that you're involved for many years, of course. I wonder if there's some sort of, like, who is the sort of convener in this space around data, because it's not actually that clear to me really who is in government at the moment. So perhaps we just should organise it ourselves, if not.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.